Let's bring in Spencer Cooven, the Chief Legal Officer at Gold Law Offices in West Palm Beach, Florida, and an attorney for several of Epstein's victims. He is joining us live right now to talk more about all of this. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, first off, I do want to get your opinion here as someone who did represent Epstein's victims. Do you believe that it was the right move for these documents to be released to the public?
I absolutely do. In representing all of the victims that I have, one of the things that angered them the most during this process was the lack of transparency. Initially, the lack of transparency by the state attorney, and then eventually by the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District in Florida, and then eventually during the proceedings against Ghislaine Maxwell in New York. There was not a full disclosure of information that I know that a lot of my victims wanted out in the general public. And the reason they wanted this information out was because they wanted the world to know not just about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, but all of the other people that were in their orbit that were taking part in this.
Did you believe that these documents would ever actually be released? There has been a lot of talk about this for a while. Was it an expected move for you? Was it surprising? What are your thoughts overall on that aspect?
So in the United States, the court systems have a general proposition that the courts must be open. In order to seal documents, they have to be highly sensitive material. And one of the things that this judge found was that a lot of the information that is in these documents, specifically people's names, let's say Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, to name a few, those names are already out in the public as being associated with Jeffrey Epstein as part of the legal proceedings. So the judge really kind of found that this information was already in the general public, so there's really no harm in releasing it. So I did have a full expectation that ultimately this information would get out.
And as somebody who did represent Epstein's victims there, take me back 2 decades or so when, the victims are coming to you with these stories and telling you about that. What was going through your mind? What are you thinking as you're hearing some of these stories?
Incredible. I can tell you that I represented the first victim that actually went to police and began the investigation here in Palm Beach, Florida. She was kind of the epicenter of that first prosecution back in 2006 and 2007. When she first came to my office and told me the story about this wealthy gentleman on Palm Beach who was bringing over young girls for massages and paying them money for sexual massages, I didn't believe it. I completely was in denial, as most of the public, I think, was back then, until the details really started coming out. And through interviews that I did with the local police department, the chief of police for Palm Beach, FBI agents at the time, U.S. Attorney's Office, it then became apparent what this was a grand sexual pyramid scheme that had Epstein at the epicenter of it, with all of these underlings beneath it that were recruiting young women for sex acts throughout the world.
And this is probably a tough question to answer, but what do you think it is about this case, about Epstein, about Maxwell, that has so many people I don't know if the right word is intrigued, but paying such close attention to these documents, for instance, to the updates that are coming in and watching it so closely?
Well, I mean, think about what sells in the news, right? The only thing this story is missing is violence. And it kind of has a little of that, too, with the death of Epstein in jail. You have money, you have sex, you have royalty, you have politics. All of those things in one story. And eventually some strange death of the perpetrator in a high-security prison. This really hits on all cylinders for a compelling story that the world wants to get to the bottom of. And hopefully, over time, we will know exactly what happened and all the facts surrounding it. What I would mention is that my clients still would like to see what the FBI seized at his property in the U.S. Virgin Islands, in his property in Palm Beach, and the property in Manhattan, because we believe that there are videos that are yet to be undiscovered and undisclosed.
So that's the other question. I mean, we know, of course, that these documents are being released. We know Epstein is no longer alive, but there are still a lot of, I guess, aspects to this that still have questions for especially your clients there. They don't have all of the answers at this point.
Very true. I mean, I can remember back when the search warrant was first issued on his home in Palm Beach. I did a walkthrough of his home as part of the litigation back then. And you could see as I walked through the home that cameras had been removed, hard drives had been removed from computer monitors. There was clearly information and data that had been taken by him and secreted off somewhere. We always thought it was going to be hidden in the U.S. Virgin Islands, but the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI raided that mansion and seized a whole bunch of material from that property. Where is it? What's in it? We'd still like that to be published because, you know, I have from very good sources, let's say, clients I've represented that have confirmed to me that videotapes exist, cameras existed in all of his properties, and some of these other people are on those videos.
Do you think you'll ever be able to get that for your clients? Do you think we're too far gone from that, or do you think that that is still a possibility and you remain hopeful?
I mean, I'm always hopeful that the truth will come out. It's taken now over 16 years for just this information to come out. But over time, I am hopeful that the U.S. government will release the information that exists because the public wants to know. And we'll keep pushing for more information to be released to the general public.
All right. And then also something else that you've said in the past, and I want to get your thoughts on, this case isn't just about Jeffrey Epstein. There are other players here that are involved.
Correct. There are numerous other people. And especially what I'm talking about are people that socialized with him after his conviction here in Palm Beach, Florida. You know, those are people that clearly should have known or had to know of his predilection, what he was doing, how he was operating, the circles that he was in. And those famous people, those rich people, that royalty, whoever was socializing with him was normalizing his behavior. And that's inappropriate. Whether or not they did anything independently wrong, we may never know. But at the end of the day, they should not have been socializing with a convicted sexual offender.
Spencer, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and provide a little bit more context into all of this. Is there anything else you want to add before I let you go?
Well, I think what's important to understand is that there are a lot of names that are identified in this recent cache of documents that was just unsealed. We're talking about over 900 pages of material, and that not all of the names in there show any evidence of any wrongdoing or doing anything inappropriate. Just because a name is mentioned in a legal proceeding doesn't necessarily mean they did something wrong. Having said that, if you look at the material, you will find that there are a number of individuals that have put themselves in completely inappropriate situations.
All right, Spencer, thank you again for taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox and help break all of this down. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.